morning. Welcome to the Three Rivers podcast for Wednesday, August 21st. I am your host, Ed Troop. Glad you could join us on our Oneberg Facebook page, Oneberg YouTube, or maybe you're joining us with audio on our Spotify page. Either way, we're happy you found us here in late August. And joining me on this week's show from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette is Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, good morning to you. Welcome back into the podcast.
Good morning, and it's been a while, and it's good to be back on with you.
Yeah, it has been a while. I think the last time we were on, we were approaching mini camp or draft. I think we were approaching the draft, and we were getting your draft thoughts. And fast forward just a couple months later, Ray, and here we are towards the end of Steeler camp. One more preseason game to go this week, and then the final cuts will begin for the Pittsburgh Steelers as they try to get to their final 53-man roster here within the next couple weeks, and then the 2024 season will be underway. Ray, a mixed bag so far. The Steelers are 0-2 in the preseason. Now, one thing I have learned after last preseason was how much do we really make of the preseason, right? Last year, Kenny Pickett, 5 for 5 on touchdown drives. The offense looked incredible going into the season. A lot of us thought that was going to be a spectacular offense, and obviously they had their struggles. So flip to this preseason. They're 0-2. And my best Myron Cope impression, through the first two preseason games. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's like a 180 from last year, to be honest with you. And I guess Steeler fans are hoping it's a 180 during the season too, because once Kenny Pickett got to the regular season, it wasn't as good as his preseason indicated. So, we talked to Arthur Smith yesterday, Ed, and, he indicated, and I think every team does this, but you're going to be real vanilla during the preseason. You're not going to show a lot to the teams that are on your schedule, especially early in the season. So everything is kind of dumbed down a little bit. But I think probably if I'm going to say there's one concern, it's just in the blocking for me, the offensive line. You got to be able to block people one-on-one. Broderick Jones had issues with that against the Bills. Troy Fautanu, before he was injured, had issues with that against the Texans. And even some of the other players on the line, I don't think it's been a great preseason for that unit as a whole. So those are the types of things that you want to see corrected for this final preseason game against the Bills. I think the defense is fine. They've given up one touchdown in the first two games. I don't see any issues there. As long as they stay healthy, I think they're going to be a top 10 defense. So I don't want to tell people not to pay attention to the preseason, but, the games start counting for real September 8th in Atlanta, and then we should have a much better feeling for how this offense is going to do this season.
Ray, talk about the quarterback position so far. That's, of course, on everybody's minds in Steeler Nation. Justin Fields, Russell Wilson. So far in the preseason, we just got our first look at Russell Wilson in game action this past week at Acrisure Stadium against the Bills. Again, my Myron Cope impression, right? On his performance. But Fields has gotten a lot of looks so far this preseason. He played pretty much, 3/4 of that past preseason game against the Bills. What's your opinion so far, Fields versus Russell?
Yeah, I mean, the way the offensive line played, Ed, it was hard for me to give a fair grade or analysis on Russell Wilson's play just because he didn't have time to set up in the pocket and do much. So I'm going to give Russell an incomplete. Hopefully the blocking is better and we'll get a much better read in this Lions game about where he is in his progress. Everyone knows, he missed the first 2.5, 3 weeks of camp with a calf injury. And, we'll see where he is hopefully Saturday afternoon. Justin Fields is a dynamic athlete. People knew that coming in. He was that at Ohio State. He was that in Chicago. Despite his record there, he made some plays with his legs. He would extend plays and hit a big play in the passing game every once in a while. But I don't think of him as a prototypical pro-style quarterback, and I think that's where his biggest issues are. Reading the middle of the field, getting the ball out quick, knowing where your second and third options are going to be, feeling comfortable enough to pull the trigger in these small NFL passing windows. I think that's where he struggled a little bit. I think he's better than where he was in Chicago, but I don't think I would entrust him to be the starter just yet. I think this is Russell Wilson's job to lose, and as long as he does well early in the season when the schedule is lighter than it is later in the season. I think most of the tough games are at the end of the season. As long as Russell plays well early, I think he's going to be the quarterback, for the remainder of the season.
Do you think we'll see Russell Wilson in this final preseason game against the Lions, being that he only had a couple series so far this preseason?
Yeah, I'm sure the coaches are probably saying, should we do it with that offensive line playing the way it is? But I think you have to run him out there. I think you need to know where he is with this injury. And number two, I think he's playing for a new OC. He's playing for a new quarterbacks coach. He has a new offensive line and new skill positions at receiver and running back. So I think he would probably tell you as well he wants to be out there so he can develop chemistry and get a feel for everyone around him. So yes, I think they're probably going to play the starters a quarter or so, maybe even into the second quarter in this game. The only guy I wouldn't expect to see, and this is mostly due to Jalen Warren's injury, is Najee Harris. I mean, they need at least one of their top two running backs healthy for the Falcons, but I think everyone else on that offense needs to play and should play after the way they've performed in the first two preseason games.
Yeah, you don't want to risk any injury for Najee Harris, that's for sure. And Harris has gotten a pretty healthy dose so far throughout these first two preseason games as well. I
Yeah.
think he's played quite a bit, so I think he's probably game ready for the regular season. Ray, talk a little bit about the wide receiver position as well. George Pickens continues to shine whenever he's showcased, though not often because they don't want to, again, risk injury or show too much in the preseason. But, he's
Right.
made some plays in camp. He's made some plays in these games. But the biggest question has been the number 2 or number 3 receiver. We've seen Van Jefferson step up. Calvin Austin's out there as well. They brought in a bunch of guys, of course, coming in, of course, with Roman Wilson being injured. I know that's a big,
Yeah.
big problem right now, not having him on the field, getting snaps as a rookie. But this wide receiver class that we've seen so far, and of course, Miller's another one too that they brought in. But Brandon Ayuk was a big name that's been pushed around for the last month in a possible trade with
Yeah.
the 49ers. That it seems like it's died off now. Is that trade possibility now officially dead?
I wouldn't close the door on it, Ed. I still think, the Steelers are the last team standing. So Omar Khan can sit back and wait, for the 49ers to make their move. So I think Omar will do just that. He'll be patient.
Ray, you still
Okay,
there?
so
There you go.
yeah, you got me.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. Lost you
So
for a second. I think we got you back. Go ahead. You were saying about Omar Khan? I lost Ray. Ray had to bounce off. He'll probably try to get back on with us. Some technical difficulties. You're watching the Three Rivers podcast for Wednesday, August 21st. I am your host, Ed Troop, right here on One Berg. Glad you could join us. We're talking Pittsburgh Steelers preseason. The Steelers are 0-2 so far in the preseason. Post-Gazette's Ray Fittipaldo, our Steeler insider, joining us on the podcast this week. And again, we lost Ray there for a second, but here he comes back into the podcast right now. And Ray, I think we got you back on here, and you were talking a little bit about Brandon Ayuk and whether that trade deal is dead. But you said the Steelers are still the only team in play so far, and Omar Khan has that card still available.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if you're Omar Khan and you're the only team, and I think you could do the deal tomorrow if the 49ers want to do it. Then you could do it, the weekend before the regular season starts, and I don't think that would be an issue when you can get a guy of Brandon Ayuk's caliber. I think you do it. So that is still out there, but the other receivers, if I had to pick a number 2 right now, I would say Van Jefferson is probably that guy. I think he's had the best camp of any of those other guys. And then when you get into 3, 4, and 5, you mentioned Roman Wilson's injury. He still didn't practice yesterday, so it doesn't look like he's going to play in Detroit. So that's not a good development for him. But number 3, Calvin Austin. Number 4, Scotty Miller. Number 5, Quez Watkins, or a guy like Dez Fitzpatrick. So we'll see how it all shakes out on Tuesday when they cut the roster down to 53. But I think we've talked to Arthur Smith about all those guys. He knows Van Jefferson from his days in Atlanta. Same with Scotty Miller. So he's familiar with those guys, and if they don't get Ayuk, I think he would feel comfortable going into the season with that core unit.
Yeah, so far so good, as far as what they've been able to bring in through free agency. But the Ayuk rumors, man, they were pretty intense there for a couple weeks. Even some media outlets, not you, Ray. We always know you have your stuff together, but some other media outlets were saying it was done. It was a done deal, and it was just a matter
Yeah.
of time before everybody signed off on it. But that never happened, and now it seems like you haven't heard too much about Brandon Ayuk coming here to Pittsburgh. Hey, switching gears a little bit, back to the offensive line, Ray. I want to get your thoughts there as well. You mentioned Broderick Jones, of course, the second-year first-round pick from last year, now going into his second season at the tackle position. We've seen Zach Frazier step up at center. The rookie is going to be the starting center with Nate Herbig's injury being out for a big length of time, possibly the whole season from what I've heard. And then you mentioned Troy Fautanu, too, who has also been banged up a little bit so far this preseason. Do you expect them to get Fautanu back soon? And also, what do you think about that core working together? I know you mentioned at the top of the podcast about their struggles, especially last week in that preseason game against the Bills.
Yeah, so let's handle the positions where they're dealing with some injuries first. Troy Fautanu told us yesterday he thinks he'll be ready for the season opener. So that's great news. That means they don't have to put him on IR. He potentially won't miss any games. When he is back, Ed, he's the starter at right tackle. He was that good in training camp. Now, that creates kind of a logjam at left tackle. You have Dan Moore, who's been the starter there for 3 years, or you have Broderick Jones, who really struggled at right tackle this past weekend, against the Bills. Broderick Jones was drafted in the number 14 overall pick last year. He's going to be the left tackle eventually, but he's dealing with some injuries now, and he's not really playing well now. So that's to be decided. It could be more. It could be Broderick Jones. Then you go to the center of the line. You're set with your guards and James Daniels and Isaac Seumalo. Those are two vets. Seumalo is probably their best offensive lineman at this point. And then the center position, Nate Herbig was placed on IR yesterday. He's done for the season. And Zach Frazier, the rookie out of West Virginia, the second-round pick, that's his job now. Now, Ed, he's had rave reviews by his teammates and his coaches. Mike Tomlin and Arthur Smith talked about him yesterday. You don't really usually see coaches speak glowingly of rookies. They usually like to, make them earn it. But from all indications are Zach Frazier is ready for this job. Now, he's a rookie. There's going to be growing pains. It's not going to be perfect all the time, but they feel really good about that draft pick. So I think the theme of this conversation is the offensive line is going to be good at some point. I just can't say it's going to be good right away just because there's so many rookies and so many new guys in the mix.
Yeah, really, you got three rookies. If you think, I mean, Broderick Jones in his second year, but you got three rookies in a group of five. And I agree with you, Ray. It's going to take some time for those guys to gel together. But hopefully, as the season goes on, they will project upward and get better as they go. And given the information you just said, that should happen. I know Zach Frazier, they're really excited about there. We have Ray Fittipaldo here on our Three Rivers podcast for Wednesday, August 21st. I am your host, Ed Schroop. Glad you could join us. We're talking Steelers preseason, Steeler camp, which is winding down. Of course, they've already left Latrobe. They're back on the south side for their practices for the duration of camp. The last preseason game against the Detroit Lions this upcoming weekend. Ray, you mentioned next Tuesday they have to get down to the final 53-man roster. Let's talk a little bit about that final 53. Any surprises on who you think might make the team that might be an outside name? And also at the same time, any surprise cuts you might anticipate?
Yeah, as far as surprises making the team, it might be by default, but you look at slot corner, Ed, they didn't bring back Patrick Peterson or Chandon Sullivan, two guys who played the majority of snaps in that role last year. They signed Cam Sutton to do that, but Cam Sutton is going to be suspended for the first half of the season. So they need somebody for September, October, early November. And right now, that's undrafted free agent Beanie Bishop, or that's Thomas Graham. And Beanie Bishop is a rookie. Thomas Graham, I think, has 7 games of NFL experience, and he didn't even play in the league last year. He was injured last year and spent the season on Cleveland's IR. So, pickings are really slim there. So Beanie Bishop is injured right now. We'll see if he could play Saturday in Detroit. But honestly, if you're looking for a surprise, might be Beanie Bishop. You also might see the Steelers go out, make a trade, or scour the waiver wire, to address that position. And if you want to stay in the secondary, they're set with Joey Porter and Dante Jackson on the outside as starters, but their backups are right now Corey Trice, who spent his rookie season on IR, Darius Rush. He was a rookie last season. The Steelers were his 3rd team. He bounced around after being a 5th-round pick. He only dressed for 3 games last season. So the Steelers like those guys. They like Trice and Rush, but they're really young and they're really inexperienced. So that's also something to watch. If there's an injury to Dante Jackson or Joey Porter, the Steelers are really young and really thin at that position.
Talk about Dante Jackson as well, Ray. Again, from what I've read and seen so far during this camp, he's played really well at the other corner opposite of Joey Porter. A guy that they acquired via trade, right?
Yeah, he was the compensation for Deontay Johnson with Carolina.
How has he performed so far? What you've seen with your own eyes at camp in these first 2 preseason games, excuse me, at that other corner position?
Yeah, he was really good early in camp, kind of got banged up. They sat him out for a week or so. He was back practicing yesterday. They really like his speed, Ed. And if you think about last year, Patrick Peterson obviously was older. He wasn't, fast like he was early in his career. They really wanted to get faster at their inside linebacker core and in their secondary. And they think they did that with with Dante Jackson and with Deshaun Elliott at strong safety, who has taken the place of Keanu Neal, another guy who started a bunch of games for last season. And like Peterson, he's out of the league. He's not playing with anyone right now. So maybe that tells you something about the state of the Steelers secondary last year, right? I mean,
right, yeah.
3 of those guys, if you include Chandon Sullivan, 3 of those guys are on the street. Now, I don't know if any of them still want to play, but the point is the Steelers had to get faster and more athletic. And to your point, they think they've done that with Dante Jackson.
How about the linebacker core, Ray, too, as we're just going through the defense right now, as far as what you've seen during training camp as well? Of course, Highsmith and what. Now, Highsmith is interesting to me because last year, of course, they gave him that big contract, they gave him the money, but he was probably mediocre last year at best, right? Didn't really have that big splash plays I think they anticipated. I think this is a big year for Alex Highsmith and his defense, don't you?
Yeah, I think he had 7.5 sacks after I think he had double-digit sacks the previous season. So obviously TJ Watt is going to see double teams, triple teams. That's going to leave Alex Highsmith in a lot of cases singled up, and he has to take advantage of that. I think he probably had a lot more pressures last year than he did sacks. So I think the focus this year is on finishing those opportunities. When you beat your offensive lineman, finish and sack the quarterback. So, Highsmith should be good opposite Watt. And Nick Herbig, the top backup, is having a tremendous camp. Everyone saw him in that Bills preseason game. Sack and a half, I think, in a quarter of work, maybe a little bit more than a quarter of work. That guy is probably starter capable for a lot of teams, but he's stuck behind 2 really good players in Pittsburgh. So, we talked about the lack of depth in the secondary. The depth at outside linebacker is really, really good with Nick Herbig on board.
Yeah, you got Herbig there, and you talked about Highsmith and Watt, but the inside linebackers, Patrick Queen, of course, was the big free agent pickup from the Baltimore Ravens in the preseason. He looked very good in his action against the Bills in this past preseason game. He was all over the football field. It seemed like he's going to be a great addition to this defense in this upcoming season.
Yeah, Patrick Queen, fast and athletic. Peyton Wilson, the 3rd-round pick out of North Carolina State. He's probably going to be the dime linebacker in sub packages. Probably the best athlete among all the linebackers. He's that good. I mean, that guy is a tremendous athlete. Um, so again, you talk about where they were last year with the inside linebackers, banged up all season long. Miles Jack, they had to bring in at the end. Miles Jack started that playoff game. He was like the GM of some hockey team in Texas where the Steelers called him. So, they were signing guys off the
Right.
street to play in those important games late in the season. And, God bless them. They made the playoffs somehow with that cast of characters. But again, like Andy Weidel said, the assistant GM said last week, they wanted to get faster on the second and third levels of that defense. And they certainly did that with the addition of Patrick Queen and Peyton Wilson.
And you mentioned last year's draft pick with Nick Herbig playing on that outside. Now you got Peyton Wilson, another linebacker they draft this year on the inside. Those are two young linebackers that could potentially be future plugins for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And you mentioned it, Herbig's looked great the last 2 years. Really, last year as a rookie looked good, and his limited action he got during the regular season, but last preseason, last camp, strong. Again, another strong camp in preseason this year. And Peyton Wilson, I know a lot of people are excited about him as well, if he could stay healthy, right? That was his
Yeah.
biggest problem was it NC State?
Yeah, he was in NC State. I think he had two knee injuries, also had a shoulder injury that ended one of his seasons. He is an older player. I think he's 24 years old. So he obviously had some red shirts and some medical red shirt situations during his time in college. But he comes from an athletic family. He's got a brother who's a pitcher for the Brewers, used to play for the Pirates. So there's good stock in that family. So I think eventually he could be a starter for this team. And Landon Roberts is going into the final year of his contract. But yeah, knock on wood, if that guy can stay healthy, it looks like the Steelers got a steal in the third round.
And Ray, finally moving to the defensive line as we wrap up the defense so far for this training camp. Of course, Cam Hayward there. And I do want to talk about Cam Hayward and his contract situation in a
Yeah.
second. But before that, Benton's another guy last year, came in as a rookie and had a real solid year for this team. But on the defensive line, who are you projecting as your starters and any surprises there so far during camp?
Yeah, so your starters, you're all set with Keanu Benton in the middle, Cam Hayward on one defensive end, then Larry Ogunjobi at defensive tackle. Before camp, Ed, I was really concerned about the depth along the defensive line, but I've been pleasantly surprised. I think Montravius Adams, the backup nose, can really help this team. He can bump out and play defensive tackle or defensive end. He's versatile. He's played well. DeMarvin Leal, former third-round pick 2 years ago, also having a really good camp. He's down from like 310 to 275. He actually, right now, he's their fourth outside linebacker too, because they don't really have many good options after Nick Herbig. So again, you talk about versatility. That guy can play up and down the line. He can play pretty much any position on that line except for nose tackle, and he can bump out and play 3-4 outside linebacker. And then you got guys like, Isaiah Loudermilk and, Dean Lowry, who was signed as a free agent. If they keep 7 tackles, those are probably going to be the 7. If they only keep 6, maybe it comes down to Lowry or Loudermilk. But I've been really impressed with Montravius Adams and DeMarvin Leal. They should be pretty good with their depth there at that position as well.
How about Cam Hayward, Ray, with the contract situation? Still no extension for him yet, but he did show up for camp and he's been participating all throughout training camp, which kind of surprised me. I thought he was going to hold back or do what TJ Watt did a few years ago and lightly participate. But he's been a full go from what I've seen so far, right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, contract negotiations are all about leverage, and it's hard to have leverage when you're 35 years old and you're coming off an injury-plagued season. It's not in the cards for Cam Hayward to dictate to the Steelers about that contract situation. So my take on the whole thing is, I'm leaving the door open that, maybe outside possibility something gets done before the season, but I think in all likelihood, Cam Hayward plays out the last year of his contract. If he plays well, the Steelers have from the end of the season until the middle of March to negotiate to get that done before he does become a free agent for the first time. So I don't want to say, it's not a priority for the Steelers, but, I think honestly, they just want to see at his age, I think they want to see how he plays before they dole out, new money to him.
That makes sense completely. That's for sure. He's he has shown not too many signs, at least the last couple of years, of slowing down. I know he was injured a few years ago where he missed the majority of the season, but outside of that, he has not shown too many signs of slowing down. Hey Ray, what can we see in the Post Gazette? I know you do it every year. I always look forward to reading it. You usually do your final 53-man projection. When should we look to see that? Is that coming up this weekend?
Yep, probably Sunday or Monday. Cut down day is 4 p.m. Tuesday, so that will be up probably Sunday evening, if not Monday morning. So I did one projection a couple of weeks ago. The last one will take place on Sunday or Monday.
That is a must-read for Steeler fans out there. Make sure you check out Ray Fittipaldo at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette and about that 53 final roster that he posts as well with his projections. Ray, I think your success rate's usually pretty good, right, my friend? I think you're usually pretty spot on with that.
Yeah, I mean it's hard this year at some of the positions. We talked about slot corner. You could make trades, you could hit the waiver wire, but yeah, I think last year I might have got 50 or 51 out of the 53, so that's not bad.
And Ray, you're a pretty big college football fan, right? Aren't you a Penn State guy?
My wife is a Penn Stater, but Penn State was the team I rooted for growing up. So yeah, I do like the Nittany Lions.
As we wrap up, I know you're the Steeler guy, you're the NFL guy, but let's talk a little college football. We got a few more minutes left with you. What do you think about your Nittany Lions this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think for James Franklin, it's kind of the same story every year. You expect them to have 9 or 10 wins, but it's all about, can you get to the playoffs? Can you be that team ahead of Ohio State or Michigan the last couple of years? Obviously, Michigan coming off a great year. Michigan's got a new coach, so we'll see how their season unfolds. But I would expect certainly top three in the Big Ten. And hey, I think there's an opportunity with Michigan maybe being in transition that you could crack the top two and maybe get into the playoff this year. But you know how it is, Ed. You could probably only afford one loss. You get two losses, it's going to be an uphill climb to make it. But I think they got a shot this year. They got a good quarterback prospect. Didn't play as well as people thought he was going to play last year. But if you talk to NFL draft people, they really like Drew Aller. So maybe he can finally put it together this year. And, maybe that offense will be a little bit better than it was last year.
Hard to believe, Ray, but football season is here. I believe college football starts this upcoming weekend. I know high school
Yeah.
football, they have week 0 games that I'll be doing the Peters Township at Cannon McMillan game for Trib Live this upcoming weekend, so I'm excited about that. But yeah, hard to believe high school football season starting, college football starts as well, and of course the NFL season just a couple weeks away as well. Hey Ray, I want to thank you for coming on the program as always, my friend. We appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
Ray Fittipaldo. And Ray, we'll have to try to get you back on this fall, maybe mid-season or so, to give a mid-season report.
Okay, that sounds good. Anytime, man. Just let me know.
I think that would be fun. There he goes. Ray Fittipaldo from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette joining us on the podcast this week here on Oneberg. We want to thank everybody for joining us here this week, and make sure you log on each and every Wednesday to the Oneberg Facebook channel, Oneberg YouTube, or on our Spotify channel. And as we get into the Pittsburgh Steelers upcoming season, Brian Carruthers and myself will have the Steeler post-game show for you immediately after every single Steeler game right here on Oneberg. So make sure you log on here on our Facebook page and give your feedback. Give us your thoughts on the Pittsburgh Steelers and what they do each and every week during the regular season. We had a lot of fun with that last year, and we'll also be recording that each and every week and getting that up as well here on Spotify, so you can listen to our post-game show throughout the week in case you miss it live. And yes, Brian and I will be on those late nights after the Steeler primetime games. Not too sure how many people jump on at 12 o'clock at night to talk about the Steelers, but we usually get a few. And again, last year we had some international folks joining us as well. Steeler Mexico, Steeler Australia. That's a lot of fun as well as long as some local personalities. So make sure you tune in this upcoming football season, the Pittsburgh Steelers post-game show right here on Oneberg with myself and Brian Carruthers. And again, we will have that audio recording up here on Spotify as well. So that's going to do it for our Three Rivers podcast for this week. We will see you next Wednesday, August 28th, where Don Rebel will be joining us here on the podcast to talk Pittsburgh Steelers in football, college football, and of course his gig, high school football in the WPIAL as well. So we'll talk all football, next week as we get that much closer to the start of the NFL season. And of course, as Ray and I were just talking about, the high school football season and the college football season starting this upcoming weekend. Hey, have a great day, everybody. We'll see you next week right here on the Three Rivers podcast here on One Bird.